Hello, I'm Frankie, and I'm honoured to welcome you to AIPH's Green City Briefing series. We have a wonderful webinar ahead of us today. May I thank our sponsors, Expo Doha, Qatar. You can see a briefing from them earlier in the series online and, as I said, on the forum. It's brilliant to see the work that's going on over in Doha. I'd also like to thank continued partnership with the Worshipful Company of Gardeners, who helped with last year's series as well. Now, please may I introduce the MC for today, Katharina Metz. She is an editor at a communications agency and lives in Berlin. She works as content and community manager for online learning platform Use, Urban Sustainability Exchange, which provides practical resources and promotes knowledge exchange for urban practitioners and researchers worldwide. Before pursuing a professional interest in the field of knowledge transfer, Katharina earned her doctorate in North American Studies at Freie Universität Berlin, and we're honoured to have her here today to carry on the conversation. So, over to you.
Thank you, Frankie, for this introduction, and thank you to AIPH for inviting me to host a session today. I'm very happy to be here. And I'd like to welcome everybody to this edition of the AIPH Green City Briefings. In the introduction to the webinar series, it states that the briefings are meant to present the principles that explain how urban greening benefits cities and to showcase how those principles are put to practice. And connecting knowledge to practice is incidentally also a central mission of the Use platform, which is an initiative by Metropolis and the city of Berlin. And we currently host more than 450 case studies showcasing successful programs and initiatives from around the world. Today, I am very much looking forward to learning something new, namely, among other things, about nature-based solutions and how they are put into practice in the light of the increasing pressures put on cities worldwide by climate change. We have two very interesting presentations today, which will be followed by a Q&A, and you can submit your questions anytime during this webinar. So let me say a few words about our first speaker, Dr. Mario Balzan. He's an applied ecologist and researches human impacts on biodiversity on the one hand, and the contributions of biodiversity and ecosystem services to human well-being on the other. He's also a teacher and looks back on 15 years of experience in science education and graduate training at various higher education institutions in Malta, Italy, Belgium, and the UK. Currently, he's bringing his multidisciplinary expertise to bear as coordinator of the project Re-Nature Horizon 2020, an EU-funded initiative which is developing a strategy to promote research and innovation for nature-based solutions in Malta. The title of his presentation is Green and Sustainable Cities of the Future, Challenges and Opportunities. Please help me in welcoming Mario Balzan to this virtual stage.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Katharina. Thank you for the invitation to AIPH and the Green City Briefings. I'll share with you my presentation. So yes, indeed, I'll be talking about green and sustainable cities of the future, and I'll be talking about challenges and opportunities based on my past experience working in Malta, but also through collaborations in international projects which I've been working on. Particularly, I focus on some of the results of the Re-Nature project, which I was coordinating. Re-Nature is a Horizon 2020 project, as Katharina has just mentioned. And I'll be talking also about some of the work we've been doing in another Horizon 2020 project, Go Green Routes, and more recently in an EIT, New European Bauhaus project, Recreate. So increasingly nature-based solutions are on the top, are becoming more prominent in the agenda of politicians, policymakers, and decision makers. Nature-based solutions are seen as an opportunity to provide benefits to community, particularly in terms of recreation, in terms of aesthetics, but also potentially in addressing some of the challenges that we face as a society. And here you can see a few projects which have all happened in the last few months, few years in Malta, where I live, where I'm working at the moment. And these are all projects which are before these projects, there was a parking space, there was an abandoned space, and now these have been converted into spaces for the community. But still, there are questions, and I think for us as researchers, for myself as a researcher, often you ask the question is, how effective are we in providing benefits? Is this really the right kind of green? Is it really leading to benefits to the community? Is it really leading to benefits to biodiversity? Is there sufficient collaboration to ensure, for example, that different people, different sectors are using these green spaces and are benefiting from them? Are we really integrating nature-based solutions across decision-making in all sectors, or is it something which is happening just in the environmental sector? And as Katharina was just mentioning today, nature-based solutions have become more and more prominent in policy making. This is a definition which is used by the IUCN, and according to this definition, but also the definition of the European Commission, nature-based solutions are actions that are mimicking nature, that are using nature, that are inspired by nature, that are used to address societal challenges, and which provide benefits both to humans and to biodiversity. And the framework which you see on the screen is actually the IUCN framework. And you see how nature-based solutions, different types of nature-based solutions, which may include environmental protection or restoration or management or development of new infrastructure, are used to tackle some of the societal challenges that we face, including drought, including food production, food security, including climate change, and so on and so forth, including green jobs, for example. And nature there is providing us with benefits. But the question that I was asking in my research is actually how effective are these interventions in leading to benefits to communities? And this slide here is showing some of the work we've been doing in Malta, where we looked at the benefits in terms of regulating services, regulating the climate, regulating the air quality in cities. And the first graph on your left is showing the link between tree cover and regulating ecosystem services. And in a highly dense environment like the one I'm working in, tree cover is particularly important, and we found a strong association between land users having high tree cover to regulating ecosystem services in terms of air quality improvement, noise abatement, carbon sequestration, and so on. But then we looked at where do you find these benefits? And something which was quite surprising was that private gardens are particularly important. Private gardens are also the ones to be lost to development in cities, as old houses with large gardens are turned into apartments, for example, and other commercial developments. On the other hand, in the middle of this graph, you see public gardens. Public gardens were not particularly effective in leading to benefits to the community. This graph, the second graph the graph on the right hand side, is actually showing an index of effectiveness which we developed in this paper. It's a ratio between the ecosystem service provided by these land users and the area, and you can see that this ratio is 4 times bigger for private gardens compared to public gardens. So clearly we can do something better when it comes to managing our green spaces to provide benefits to communities. And then we ask the question, who is actually benefiting from these benefits that we get from ecosystems, from urban environments, from nature-based solutions? And we did a correlation analysis. This looks complex, but this is simply a correlation. So we looked at some of the benefits, so 14 ecosystem services, and we looked at population data and tried to look at the link between where people are living and how far that is from spaces having high ecosystem service capacity, so potentially being more exposed to the benefits provided by nature. And what comes up is this correlation, positive correlation, is shown in blue. So what you could see here, I'll use my laser pointer, is that is that the first large box where there's a blue color, you will find the members of the population who are at a relative disadvantage, and they tend to live far away from spaces having high capacity to provide environmental benefits. The second box is a box showing there is influenced primarily by population density. That is, if you live in places with high population density, you also tend to live in places having some other benefits, like, for example, associated with cultural heritage or the spiritual value of nature. So these are important results. It shows that some people have less access to nature, depending on where they live, depending on their backgrounds. And I leave that like this for now and focus more widely on what we have been doing in Renature at regional scale. So we've collected experiences at regional level. We asked people to send us their examples, the case studies of nature-based solutions from across the Mediterranean region, and in other regions also having a Mediterranean climate. And the case studies look something like this, as you can see here. These case studies are really consist of a spreadsheet with a lot of data. We're basically asking them, what societal challenges have you tackled using nature-based solutions? And then we categorize nature-based solutions on the x-axis, as you can see. There's building scale, public spaces, water bodies. So the type of nature-based solutions and the type of challenges which are tackled on the y-axis. So biodiversity loss, ecosystem degradation, low biodiversity knowledge, and so on. And you can see how most of the case studies, this graph here is particularly for Malta, but we also have this data for the Mediterranean region, and you see similar patterns. Most of the case studies were focusing on biodiversity loss, ecosystem degradation, low biodiversity knowledge, and tackling drought and heat risk. And the rest of the graph is actually very yellow greenish in color, which shows that we have only a few case studies. Well, we asked them also, we asked our stakeholders, what are the benefits which you are tackling through nature-based solutions? And again, you see that most of the case studies are in natural areas. They are tackling a very narrow range of, they are not tackling, they identify a narrow range of benefits, which means that although we talk about the multifunctionality of nature-based solutions, often we're really working with a small subset of nature-based solutions, and the scope in improving this, in better using nature-based solutions to provide a wider range of benefits to communities and a wider representation of communities. And then we also asked them, well, could you link to an SDG, a Sustainable Development Goal? Which SDG is linked to your work? And it was primarily SDG 11 and SDG 15. And you know, SDG 11 is Sustainable Cities and Communities. SDG 15 is Life on Land. While for the rest, we really don't have too much case studies. And this is something which we have seen for Malta primarily, but also when you consider case studies which were coming from the rest of the Mediterranean region, we found quite a few gaps. So we're talking about challenges and opportunities. I think at the moment, although we have quite a few case studies, clearly these case studies are not effectively using nature-based solutions for full multifunctionality, for a wide range of benefits, and to tackle a wide range of societal challenges. And in Renature, the Horizon 2020 project I was coordinating, we did some knowledge synthesis, one of which is actually looking at the gaps in knowledge which limit the uptake of nature-based solutions. This followed the Delphi survey. It was led by the University of Cambridge, Dr. Lindix, who is shown here, and Dr. Miriam Grace. And we identified 47 knowledge needs, which eventually led to this publication. And these were the top 5 knowledge needs of our stakeholders. What exactly are nature-based solutions? How do you adapt nature-based solutions to dry Mediterranean conditions? How do you increase the use of nature-based solution in urban planning? How to retrofit existing buildings? And we don't really have cost-benefit assessments of nature-based solutions, and this is something that is limiting their uptake. In another study, we used the framework by Anderson, 2021, there's two papers which link basically the benefits that you get from green blue infrastructure, shown now by the laser pointer, and the beneficiaries. And there's three filters, which are actually infrastructure, institutions, and perceptions. These three filters will influence whether these benefits flow from ecosystems, from green blue infrastructure to beneficiaries. And for the case study of Malta, through interviews with our stakeholders, we try to identify the barriers and the enablers. If you see a cross is a barrier. Okay, so in this case, for perceptions, we ask them, what do you think are the barriers in terms of perception? And you see there that across this potential opportunity to mobilization, to realization, there are actually quite a few barriers. The public may not be fully aware of nature-based solutions and their alternatives and the benefits which they give rise to. The promoter may not know too much about that as well, and so on. Also, in terms of institutions, the lack of cost-benefit assessment may result in low interest by developers. The low institutional capacities, especially because nature-based solutions often require engineers, but also people from horticultural science or from an ecological perspective, and so on. Difficulty in establishing interdisciplinary approaches and collaborations. The lack of standards, the lack of ongoing monitoring. So these were key barriers. The enablers focused more on the benefits to the developer, like a CSR action. The benefits associated with bringing stakeholders together, okay, or the link to regional policies and guidance which are there, and the funding availability in terms of research, for example, or in terms of implementation. This is there because it's very much linked to what is happening in terms of policy and how policy is focusing on increasing the uptake of nature-based solutions. And finally, also in terms of infrastructure, there are quite a few barriers. There's limited space availability, especially when space is very much limited and when space is something which costs a lot, especially in cities, for example. So there's competition for space. There is need to better integrate MBS principles into development proposals and terms of reference. There is a need to tackle the services, so potential the services arising from including nature in cities. And there are few examples. There are few examples of existing practices. There are also potentially trade-offs, for example, in some cases, like if you're working in a cultural center, a city with a cultural history, how do you integrate nature-based solutions with the protection of cultural heritage? And then finally, I'd like to mention two examples where we try to tackle these barriers and focus more on creating opportunities. This was the Renature Horizon 2020 project. Here we had a few training events, and we trained a community of more than 500 people in training courses. As you can see here, we've brought trainers from 16 countries together, and we've created as well a local cluster which was trained to work interdisciplinary and to foster the uptake of nature-based solutions. Another project which we're currently working on is Recreate. This focuses more on the interaction between nature and communities. And here we're using nature-based placemaking as a tool. We have engaged with the communities through citizen science activities like BioBlitz or the creation of pop-up parks, as you can see here. But basically, we ask communities, how would you like to change your space? How would you like to integrate nature in your space? And this has come up with a range of activities where we have managed to significantly increase the participation of communities and to bring an interdisciplinary team together. So in conclusion, I think there is an increasing interest in greening cities, especially through nature-based solutions. It's a term which is coming more and more often used in policy and in practice. But how effective are these interventions? We need to ask this question. How effective are these interventions in leading to net benefits to biodiversity and leading to improvement in ecosystem services and their well-being? And finally, as we have seen, we have identified the challenges and opportunities for increasing the uptake of nature-based solutions. These are various and across the perceptions, infrastructure, and institutional filters. And projects like the one I presented, Renature and Recreate, are trying to tackle these barriers and develop a community of practice that brings people together. That's it. Thank you very much for the invitation once again.
Thank you, Mario, for this presentation. There will be time for a Q&A later in the session. I would like to present today's second speaker now. And just to let you know, there is an update regarding our second speaker, because unfortunately, Dr. Marina Robles Garcia is unable to attend today. Luckily, however, we have someone else here to present on her behalf. And it is my pleasure to introduce now Valder Pliego del Ángel. He has a degree in political science and public administration from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, as well as a law degree. And he has specialized in areas related to environmental law and environmental public policies. Within the public sector, he has worked in areas such as the sub-prosecutor for legal affairs of the Environmental Prosecutor and Territorial Planning of Mexico City and the Secretariat of the Environment in the capital. He currently works as an advisor at the Mexico City Environmental Secretariat, where he has coordinated and monitored various projects related to the city's revegetation strategy, among other topics. Today, he's going to share with us insights about Mexico City's environmental and climate change program, which was awarded with the AIPH World Green City Award in the category Living Green for Climate Change this year. Please help me in welcoming Valder to the virtual stage.
First of all, I would like to communicate three brief messages. First, I want to thank, on behalf of the Head of Government of Mexico City, Claudia Sheinbaum, the recognition given to Mexico City as the greenest city in the category of Living Green for Climate Change, and reiterate the recognition to the AIPH for this important initiative. Second, we convey our apologies because due to force majeure, the Secretary of Environment of Mexico City, Marina Robles, cannot accompany us today, as Katharina told us. And thirdly, I want to highlight Mario's presentation, which we find very interesting, and it seems to me that we share a common vision on this topic. I'm going to share a presentation to illustrate some of the work that has been done in Mexico City to plan, execute, and monitor our revegetation strategy. First of all, as a general framework, Mexico City is part of the Valley of Mexico metropolitan area. It has 9.2 million inhabitants within the city and 22 million in the entire metropolitan area. 41% of the city is urban and 59% consists of conservation land and rural areas, which is a particular characteristic of our city that not many people knows. Mexico City concentrates also 12% of Mexico biodiversity and 2% of world's biodiversity. So, in 2019, the Head of Government of Mexico City presented the Environmental and Climate Change Program of Mexico City with a horizon of the year 24, which consists of 7 axes. Together, the actions of this program have allowed the city to mitigate 1.8 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent annually. And the first of these axes, one of the most relevant, is the revegetation of the countryside and the city, which alone has contributed to the mitigation of 4,635 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And this was possible thanks to a comprehensive vision, not limited to planting trees, and the establishment of very ambitious goals proportional, we think, to the environmental and climatic challenges that do not admit the postponement of measures with a deep scope to regenerate ecological conditions. First, we created the first special green infrastructure program of Mexico City to establish the basis that would allow the construction of an interconnected and multifunctional network of green infrastructure through the entire city, but based on the diagnosis of each one of the areas of the territory, established zoning in 9 regions that you can appreciate in this map. Based on this diagnosis, and thanks to close coordination between the government of Mexico City and the 16 city halls equivalent to municipalities of the city, as well as an open call to the private sector and the collaboration of the academy and different organizations, we have managed to plant more than 34 million trees, shrubs, and herbaceous plants, 22 million in conservation land and 12 million in urban areas. With the best made, we increased in nurseries from less than 500,000 to more than 10.6 million annual plants. We rescued 80 native species that are now being produced in our nurseries from the collection of seeds, and a project that we carried out with the university, with the National Autonomous University of Mexico. We built more than 800 gardens for pollinators, as well as training actions for government workers and the application of techniques such as endotherapy in urban trees. One important project was one that we called sowing parks. We invested more than 3 billion pesos, about $152 million, to create and rehabilitate 16 large parks, mainly in areas with less access to public spaces, in which green areas and infrastructure for recreation, sports, and environmental education. Among these 16 spaces, we want to talk about these 5 natural protected areas that are under the administration of the Secretariat of the Environment, and that were previously under an isolation scheme in past years, which rather than conserving them, had led them to a condition of abandonment, for which reason said policy was replaced by a vision of rapprochement with the citizenry, under the premise that the best way to preserve them is by getting people to know them, enjoy them, fall in love with them, and then consequently become the most important allies for their conservation. Among these multiple actions, we find relevant to highlight the creation of the Gardens for Life program, in which more than 700 women have been trained in pollination gardening with a gender approach. They have built collaboration networks and have contributed to creating most of the gardens in the city. In addition, 115 workers from the municipalities that carried out green area management activities have been trained. And as part of the same program, the environmental culture team of the Ministry of Environment of Mexico City prepared a guide for the creation of gardens for pollinators, designed for training within the program, but also for the general use among citizens. In order to have a notion about the impacts of the recovery of ecological conditions in the city, we would like to share some very concrete data that has resulted from the biodiversity monitoring program in Mexico City and some geospatial analysis carried out. First of all, 42 new species of birds were registered in the city in these years, going from 355 to 397 species. 2 new hummingbird species recorded, the black-chinned hummingbird and the dull hummingbird, reaching a total of 18 registered hummingbird species in Mexico City, an increase in the number of sightings of rare species such as bobcat, gray fox, coyote, and proboscis bat. The case of the gray fox stands out, of which there was only 2 sightings until before 2019, and currently we have 27 sightings recorded. Also, the surface area of urban green area per inhabitant increased from 14.5 square meters to 19.4. There were 387 hectares of conservation land were previously invaded and are now being recovered and restored. The number of clean days per year, also in which no contaminant exists health standards, has increased from 99 clean days in the year 2018 to 128 clean days in 2021. Well, these are some of the information, I think, very synthesized that we wanted to share with you to open the conversation. And we would like to share a video, if you let us, to share our vision and some images of the work that we have been doing in Mexico City.
En 2019, la Ciudad de México decidió comenzar el reto de plantar millones de árboles y otras plantas para mejorar las condiciones ambientales y aumentar los espacios públicos.
Lo que ha planteado Marina hoy aquí es este reto que hacemos no solamente a los gobiernos, sino también a las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, a los empresarios de nuestra ciudad, a los ciudadanos, a la ciudadana, a los niños, a las niñas y en general a todos junto con el gobierno para emprender una labor histórica quizá de revegetar la Ciudad de México.
Well, thank you very much. We wanted to share this information, probably very synthesized, because the number of areas of analysis is enormous, as we could see also in Mario's presentation. And but I think it's a good basis from which we can continue to collaborating in these topics. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Valder, for this presentation. I would like to welcome Mario back to the stage, and you too, Valder, so we can begin with the Q&A. And while the questions are coming in, I would like to use the privilege of being host to this session and ask the first one. And it concerns the issue of inter or transdisciplinarity. So Mario, it's apparent that an integrated research strategy is at the heart of what you do at Renature Horizon 2020. And you mentioned in your presentation where you stated that it is especially the lack of interdisciplinary approaches that accounts for a lack of effectiveness maybe of nature-based solutions. So my question would be whether you could expand a little bit on the issue and also give us some insights on how you maybe want to alleviate the problem. And to you, Valder, having read the case study, it becomes apparent that a transsectoral and a transdisciplinary approach was also vital to the success of your program. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about your experience of working across disciplinary and sectoral divides, and what were the merits and the limits of the transdisciplinary approach you chose? Maybe Mario, you can start.
Okay, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed the presentation by Valder, and I think this is an excellent example of the benefits of nature and cities. And well, yeah, I mean, transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity in a way as well are very important, and also one of the biggest challenges, I would say, because we are used to working in a sectoral way, and here we're saying that nature can solve problems that are essentially not always environmental. We're talking about economic aspects and social aspects as well. So there, transdisciplinarity and working across disciplines with different groups and communities and stakeholders is important. But I can share with you some ideas. I think the answer is very much context dependent, for sure. But what we try to do is we try to first of all develop the evidence. I mean, what is it the kind of benefits that nature provides, and where are they mostly needed? I think that is very important, because otherwise there's a risk of always advantaging the same members of society, the same communities, and so on. And I think that's very important. So evaluate the challenges, evaluate the societal challenges, develop the evidence. That's very important, and that's integral, I think, to success when it comes to using nature. And then the second part, I would say, is actually about involving stakeholders and seeing what they are doing, breaking these barriers, these silos, in a very informal way often, because if you're bringing people together to learn about something, to share their experiences, often it gets very informal. And we actually, we're discussing a lot of clustering. So how we can bring together stakeholders, not just to network, but also to build bridges, to bring bridges between stakeholders and their activities. So in our case, we try to develop a stakeholder cluster, which is meeting continuously for training activities, for knowledge sharing activities and experiences, for practical tasks, which we involve them in. So problem solving approaches, for example. And we would sort of have a task where in a training course where people would go outside, monitor nature, ask people questions, and this was very, very important. So we use when it comes to training and capacity building, we use a mixed sort of effort where we focused on the formal academic community and the young people, but then also focused a lot on practitioners, and there the objective was to bring people together so that they can share their experience, because the experience is already there and the knowledge is already there. And we went beyond borders, so we try to also share experiences when it comes to existing and past case studies, as I was explaining there before, with the nature-based solutions compendium that we developed in nature, and eventually this led to a toolkit which can actually be used by practitioners to see what has been implemented and where. So in a way, we're bringing also the international community together. I think that's what I would suggest. Break these silos and get people together to discuss, to learn together, to solve problems together, and in a way that helps a lot, I would say. It's a start, at least.
Thank you. Valder, would you like to share your experience?
Thank you, Catherine. Related to the question that you mentioned before, undoubtedly, interdiscipline is fundamental, and in practice, this transdiscipline also becomes a coordination challenge, right, between areas of government, and also with other sectors, such as academia and the private sector, mainly. Yeah, and we of course face the challenge of coordinating, for example, with the 16 municipalities that exist in Mexico City, right? And we believe that an adequate, increasingly solid synergy was achieved based on measures such as that we previously met with all the municipalities and established agreements, so that in each one we could have direct responsibles for the revegetation strategy directly. So this allowed us to be in permanent communication, day and night, to attend not only the execution of the program, but also the monitoring of the program, and to attend any circumstances that could arrive in the following. months and years, of course, until they. So I think that is one of the keys of the interdisciplinary vision here in government, which is a little bit different from the academic vision that doesn't have that challenge directly, but here in practice is one key element that makes the difference, right? So I think political agreements and economic agreements with the private sector and an open convocatory to all the sectors is key in this kind of strategy.
Thank you. Yeah, I see that questions are coming in our Q&A little window here. Maybe I'll just read it out, Mario, because I'm seeing that you're writing something, but maybe we can share it with the rest of the audience. So Mario, I'm just reading out aloud the question submitted. You spoke about how effective we are in providing benefits. In your experience, to what extent does careful plan selection lead to Malta being able to better provide and maximize these benefits? Do specific plans provide more benefits than others? Were these considerations included in the index of effectiveness used in your research?
Thanks a lot for this question. Yeah, I think I was typing an answer actually, but yeah, I mean, it's in general, the index of effectiveness is an index. So it's based on ecosystem service indicators, which are then, there's a calculation which is shared in the paper, but then they are converted to a ratio with the area. Did it include specific plans? No, the region, because we were working at a regional scale, and often at that scale, you don't have which trees, which plants are found in specific environments, particularly if you move beyond the public spaces. So there we were working in also private gardens, and we were working mostly with satellite data, imagery, and remote sensing. So it was very difficult to identify specific plants. But do plants make a difference? Is species or traits of specific plants, are they important? Certainly so. So I think this is the next step of our work. We are currently working in developing functional traits data, because this is what really matters, I think, and understanding how the specific characteristics of trees or plants, or in this case, shape and affect the type of benefits that we get. So this is the next part of our analysis, which is something that we are working on at the moment.
Great, thank you. And I have another question for Valder. How does Mexico City finance these amazing greening initiatives? In your experience, how might cities attract more funding for implementation in the future?
Thank you, Katharina. Well, that is one of the biggest questions, right? The funding, the financing, and the not only for the execution, but for the maintaining of this kind of programs. We think that is one very interesting area to explore and to share our experiences, right? Here in Mexico City, we have to say that most of the financing comes from public resources, right? We also have 3 nurseries, no? We have the fortune to have 3 nurseries in the city, but of course they require, the nurseries required an important investment, as you could see in our presentation and in our video, because in past years, which was very sad, they didn't receive the maintenance and the financing that they needed. So they were producing less than 1 million plants per year. When we have one nursery, we have 3 nurseries, but one of them, which is the biggest, have the capacity to produce 30 million plants per year, which is something that I imagine not many cities have. But it also needs to be part of the public policy, because if not, it can be there, and if you don't invest in the nurseries and environment as a priority, you can also depend on this kind of capacities, public capacities to this kind of strategy. So in the case of Mexico City, we have a lot of the public resources given to the environmental program. But the other part that also, of course, complements this possibility is that the participation of the private sector. No? In 2019, the chief of government of Mexico City, as you could see in the video, did an open call to all the city, to all citizens, to all the academy, to all the private sector, so they could participate. And they were joining, in different stages, in different ways, some of them with money, some of them with other with knowledge, with her teams to join us in the activities, and we had a really important participation of the private sector. No, we made a list. I don't remember the exact number now, but are dozens of private companies that join us, with finance and other kind of collaborations. So this could be able, because 34 million plants, it's a number that we couldn't even imagine before we designed this strategy. We had to put a lot of planning, but also a lot of collaboration with other sectors in this matter to achieve these kind of goals. So I think not all the cities have these conditions, for example, the nurseries that I was talking about, but I think every city is able to establish agreements with the different sectors. And the most important thing to have enough money to execute these activities is that it's a priority for the city. When it's a priority for the government, it's a priority for the other sectors, and then you can achieve this kind of collaborations and have the resources that are needed.
Thank you. I have another question for Mario. Acknowledging that cities increasingly have to plan to adapt to the changing climate, is Malta considering plant preparation in collaboration with the horticulture industry for the implementation of NBS for adaptation in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for myself in terms of research. I think as I was saying before, it's important to develop a transdisciplinary approach. Of course, as we were just hearing Valder also mentioning now, this is a key consideration: the type of plants that you put, that you plant, and especially when considering that there are massive, often projects for restoration, for afforestation, for space creation. Working with horticulture, I think is mandatory, is important, and is bound to happen. So I think it's important. I think there are many initiatives which already have such collaborations, and without these collaborations, it's very difficult to actually implement nature-based solutions at all. And I think now the question is, how do we ensure that what we are doing now is actually adapted to the conditions of the future, for example, to a changing climate? And there is where research and horticulture and practice can come together, I think, to answer some of these more applied questions for the cities of the future. What happens when, I work in a Mediterranean city, the temperatures will continue to increase very quickly, as they have been doing over the last decades? Are the kind of natural environments or nature-based solutions adapted to the city of the future? To a conditions where it doesn't rain for months, for example. So these are things where you are working really at the interface between research and practice, and there is where academia, the public sector, and private sector, including horticulture, have to collaborate, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. I think we have time for one last question, and it goes out to Valder. What advice would you give to inspire other cities around the world who are less advanced in their climate change adaptation strategies? What was key to the success of implementing Mexico City's climate strategy? And I'm sure it's not only one key, but would you care to answer this, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Katharina and Mario. I want to go back just for a second to the last question, because there's something important I didn't mention. In the Green Infrastructure Program that for Mexico City that we created in the last 2 years, one of the things that has this program is a portfolio of projects, right? 2024 and to 2030. So the intention is that the private sector and the following administrations have a greater facility to plan, collaborate, and finance this type of projects. No? But the projects are there. They are designed to be executed in the city, which facilitates a lot the collaboration, for example, for the private sector, right? Which in many occasions they say they want to collaborate, but it's not clear how they can collaborate. So this is a clear way in which we can facilitate this for the private sector, for example, right? And with this last question, I think that's the most important question, because one of the things that you need to execute ambitious plans in environmental topics is the decision and the priority that you give to this kind of topics, right? I mentioned, for example, around more than 3,000 million pesos, 3 billion pesos, for only for one program that we called Sowing Parks, no? To create 16 big spaces in the more necessity areas of the city. So this kind of decision cannot be made if there is no previous decision, politic decision, and social decision. I will have to say that you want a city with more green areas, and this is one of your priorities. And not only green areas, also with more public spaces and with more biodiversity, and you have that clear in your head. So I think that the invitation to all the citizens and the participation of all the citizens that demands you also, no, to as government to destine this kind of resources to this type of project is fundamental, right? And then you have to a lot of work planning and designing and executing, of course. But the first and most important thing, I think, is that you desire to live in a greener city, no? And I think many cities are going this way, and that's very, very good sign.
I was on
your mic is off.
Yeah. Thank you very much for these very nice closing statements. I would like to ring in the end of the session by saying thanks. Thank you, AIPH, for creating this space of learning. And thank you both, Mario and Valder, for 2 brilliant presentations and for a very engaging Q&A. Thank you also to all the participants for submitting your questions. And back to you, Frankie.
Thank you ever so much. Yes, can I echo that thank you to the speakers? They were very interesting talks and really highlight that role of cohesion in being able to create an environment, an urban environment to combat climate change. Thank you also, Katharina, for being the MC today. You did a brilliant job and some really interesting questions. So the result of our poll at the beginning there showed that 40% of today's participants have direct knowledge and examples of the power of plants to support the response to climate change, and 60% knew of good examples. So that's brilliant. I'd like to once again thank our sponsors, Expo Doha and the Worshipful Company of Gardeners, for being able to make this series of briefings possible. And this was the final of 4 briefings that have happened this year, and we continue them next year, with the next being on the 14th of February. But in the meantime, if you do want to stay up to date and join in the discussion, please do join AIPH's Green City Forum, check out our Twitter and sign up for the Global City Updates. Stay in touch with the power of plants. Can I thank everybody once again for participating in today's webinar? It really has been brilliant. And we will close with a short video from Expo Doha. Thank you very much. And wherever you are, have a lovely afternoon, morning or evening.
You are a seed, the beginning of a new awareness, a new global movement. You have life in you. Share it, spread it, bring your thoughts and skills. Make it all fruitful. Tomorrow brings challenges and opportunities. Grow. Grow the resources to embrace science and experience for global sustainability. Grow the tools and use technology to cultivate a new and better future together. Grow the knowledge to reconnect to nature and promote a greener development. Grow the balance between local and global, planet and people, today and tomorrow. Growth starts with you. Welcome to Expo 2023, Doha, Qatar. Qatar has the perfect conditions for this growth to take roots. From Doha, we can grow a green desert and a better environment. Our Expo site consists of 3 main areas designed to host, gather, and inspire. Together we can sow the days of tomorrow for everyone to enjoy, everywhere. We are expecting you on the 2nd of October 2023. One Expo site, consisting of 3 character areas, is growing now to welcome you in 2023 to the future of horticulture. You are the seed and the movement that will gather the world in Qatar. Together in Doha, we will grow a green desert for a better environment.